Hi, my name is Tara Kachaturoff, and I'm the host of Michigan Entrepreneur, where we feature businesses from startup to stellar. Today, I have as my special guest Tom Borg, who's the founder and president of Tom Borg Consulting. Welcome to the program.
Thank you, Tara. It's a
Well,
pleasure to be here.
it's great to see you again, and you're kind of our resident expert in all things in the corporate world. And today we're going to be talking about a great topic called quiet quitting. But before we do, I'd love you to tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do.
Thank you. So, I'm a business consultant that works at the intersection of leadership, communication, and culture. So, what I do is I go in and work with clients, their leadership teams, the presidents, CEOs of companies, just help them open up communication and build a more vibrant, healthier culture within their organization.
And what types are you just working with companies here in Michigan, or what's the expanse of your business?
Pretty much throughout the United States, but a lot of it is focused here in the Midwest.
All right. Well, today we're going to be talking about a really interesting topic called quitting, which we've heard a lot about in the news. And before we jump into this topic, let's get a good definition, or as we jump into the topic, a good definition of what is quiet quitting. And then I want to kind of unpack that because it seems similar to something else I know about.
Sure. I think it's a new name for something that has existed in the workplace for years, forever, it seems. It's where employees start to get disengaged. They're not aligned with the mission and purpose of the organization, and they just quietly say, "Hey, I'm gonna just do what it takes to get by. I'm not gonna go the extra mile. I'm just going to show up and do the bare minimum." That's kind of what quiet quitting is.
But the thing is there's that expectation, they come in and there is a minimum that you're supposed to meet as an employee.
Hmm.
So why is this different? Isn't it just about doing what's expected of you? I mean, is it just this really subtle nuance, or is it a spin on an old idea? I mean, I don't really see the difference.
There's really not a difference as much as we would look at as a definition. But I think with the conditions that we've been seeing in the last 2, 3 years with COVID, it's brought it into a more of a focus. Challenge we all know about at this time. It's very difficult to find good employees. It's difficult to find employees. So what we're seeing is the workplace is having to retain people who maybe they wouldn't in the past if it was a really hot market where people were vying to get positions. So I think that's part of it. The problem is there's just not enough good employees out there, so companies are having to just tolerate poor performance.
Well, the thing is, I mean, there is a difference between doing what's expected of you and poor performance,
Hmm.
wouldn't you say? Like,
There is, but I will tell you, with some of the clients I'm working with now, they have employees that in a time when there were more people available for certain positions, they'd be gone. But they're there because they can't find anybody else to replace them. So that's an issue.
so there's probably more to just doing the minimum. There could potentially be poor performance, but then there also could be a power play from the standpoint of the employee versus employer.
Yes, I think there's certainly a lot more leveraging power for employees today with the issues of, we hear the concerns right now where people want to continue to work from home or at least be in a hybrid situation where they can work from home 2 or 3 days out of the week. Some employers are fighting that. They want them all back to the office. So what we're finding is that certain employees are saying, "Hey, I don't want to do that. And if you make me do that, I'm not going to come back to work. I'll work someplace else." So that's a challenge. It's a more complicated scenario now than it was maybe 5 years ago. So it's becoming an issue with this business of people say, "Well, I'll show up for work, but hey, I'm going to do the bare minimum to get by and cover myself." And that's what we're going to do.
The funny thing is, when I was working in corporate for many years, I would say 90% of the people were just doing quiet quitting then because they were just doing the minimum to get
Hmm.
by, and they were always leaving at 5. I never got to because of where I worked in the company, but it was to me, like, I didn't really I don't see how it's quite that different right now except from the leverage standpoint. You know what
That's
I
it.
mean?
I agree with you,
It's
Tara.
a
I agree with
actual
you.
human
It is.
behavior.
It isn't much different than it was then. Just a little more focus on it, I think. It's a popular term that has come up. Now, I'll talk about another term I've heard about or read about just the other day. That's kind of a spin-off, or at least a reaction to quiet quitting. But the fact is I think we'll talk about some of the ways we can fix all this. But it comes down to the fact that people are not engaged in what they do to earn an income today. That's a challenge. For those people that are quietly quitting, it just tells you they're not really excited about what they're doing, and maybe they're in the wrong career field, maybe they're working for the wrong company, but certainly there's something that needs to be corrected there.
Well, I think there's also that layer that some folks are surfacing, which is the mental health issues. I mean, everybody's been through a lot of stress and strain for several years, and
Hmm.
fortunately, um, even in the first few minutes of a stressful situation, it starts changing the brain. And after 2.5 years, your brain is completely changed. I mean, that's
Hmm.
science, that's fact. Um,
Hmm.
and unless there's a great deal of other types of work that is done from a mental health perspective, these things aren't actually going to go away. I mean, it's because the mental health will trump anything else that a company tries to do. It just isn't possible to move off of that serious a situation, and that we have a mental health crisis in this country, and it's actually getting worse and worse, unfortunately. Um, so this is a very complicated topic, and I noticed that it's been coming up a lot in the past year. What do you think caused people to start saying this? Was it the fact they don't want to address that mental health is really probably the most significant factor underlying this? What was the reason you think this started surfacing in the media? And I know it's just speculation on your part, but what do you think it was, besides like coming up with something new to publish articles around?
Well, I think it's something like as you mentioned earlier, it has been around, just been exacerbated by the COVID situation and the lack of good employees for available for positions. It's a catchy term, quiet quitting. So it's like everything when you have a new term given to something, it catches attention. And although it may be similar to something that has been experienced in the past, it just creates the awareness, and maybe that's a good thing. And we'll talk about that a little later. But that is a good thing because first you have to identify the problem before you can solve it. What are some of the causes to this problem, right?
Yeah.
You alluded to that a moment ago with the mental stresses that are going. Yes, that's very real, and it's not going away.
And Tom, it's interesting because this coming back up, it's always been around and people talk about it, but now
Hmm.
it got resurfaced, and it is important for people to pay attention to it because everything's changing and we're getting more automated. There's less people needed in all jobs. That's just a fact of life, and it's going to continue that way going forward, which is changing the complete structure of our workforce and
Hmm.
what even kids are going to have to look forward to in the future. It's not going to be the same. It won't even look like what we have right now 3 years from now. The world
Hmm.
is changing that fast. So let's talk a little bit about can you tell if somebody has quietly quit? You're in your company, you're the CEO, and you see a lot of people. You walk around sometimes, maybe see the troops out there in the cubicles in the offices if they're working you know at the company, or you're on Zoom calls. Why don't we talk about like some of the physical things we'll see if we're in the physical presence, and then let's kind of look on the online world and if there's any clues that people can start seeing that their employees are quiet quitting.
Well,
Well,
one of
one
them would be
would be
where
where
people
people.
take as many sick days as possible throughout the year. In other words, if they can take a day off, they'll take a day off. They won't show up, or they'll call in sick. So that's part of it. Another one is whether they'll come into work and you may see signs of tardiness. They come in late, want to go home early. They'll be involved in situations at work meetings, but they're not actively taking the lead. They're not actively showing any initiative to uh, go the extra mile. So these are part of those things. There are other people just kind of quietly just don't participate. They maybe in the past have try to offer suggestions or ways of doing things differently and been shut down. So they just kind of sullenly say, well, I can't change things. I'll just put up with what's going on here and do enough to get by. So these are, you can see it in their eyes. You can see it in the way they behave, the conversations around the water cooler. Just people just don't seem to be happy about being in the position that they're in, doing the work that they're doing. They're overstressed. They're probably working way too many hours. We see this all over the place. The people that are still showing up, they're they're being put in a place where they have to do a lot more
Mm.
with less employees. There are people that are positions that are going unfilled. So what does that mean? People need to step up and take responsibility for that, and that can wear on people after a while, and we'll see where they just have to resort to doing the least amount to just maintain some sense of balance in their lives.
And something important that you brought up was the fact, when you're talking about how they're not contributing ideas and not speaking up about things, that also is so serious in the big scheme of things because the intellectual property or the knowledge base of the company isn't passed on to other people.
Hmm.
The good ideas aren't surfaced. So then the whole company really suffers because you speaking up could be the thing that creates something innovative in a product that they're working on, or it changes the direction of something, or somebody can even know something about a competitor and not say anything, like that
Hmm.
is something they know, and they just say whatever, I'm not going to even share it, and the next thing you know, you're being outsmarted by your competitor in something because they really did know something because they have connections, and they just could have shared something that could have made all the difference. I mean, the ripple effect of this is just, when you start thinking about the implications of shutting down communication or doing things that don't make people feel like they want to even speak up, everybody loses. Everybody loses.
Not a
Not a
healthy
healthy
workplace.
workplace. So if we look on the online world, and we know a few of these things already, like if we look at our employees, when we're engaging with them on Zoom or even on the phone, if people are just still using the phone in some cases, or chat, what are some things that are evident that they are quiet quitting, besides the fact that they're not turning on the camera when they're on Zoom? What are some things that you could share in that arena? Because that's also, managers need to be aware of this and look for the clues, right?
Well, I
I
think
think
one
one
of
of
the areas you
the
can look for is when people are on camera, are they really engaged? Are they really paying attention? That's part of it. Certainly, are they participating in the conversation? Are they getting involved? That's if they're not, then that's a sign that they're not really totally into what they're doing, that they're quietly uh, quitting in that respect. So those may be some of the things. Other things maybe is, hey, if, are they coming to the meeting late? Are they getting, are they leaving early? As you mentioned, are they turning their camera off? Uh, these things that just make for, it's like you're in a situation where people are there, but they're not there, and they're just waiting for the meeting to be over with. Or it's just that kind of feeling that's generated by the the presence they all have being in that meeting.
I've even seen some interesting behavior myself in being in some big group meetings where, like people are eating their meals in front of other people and you can clearly tell they're doing other work, or you know what I mean? It's they really, you wouldn't do that in a business meeting, right? You wouldn't
Mhm,
be eating your meal in front of people. I mean, I've seen all sorts of interesting behavior. So that's just something from my personal experience, which I can't believe, because if you've ever seen somebody eat on Zoom in front of a group, it's very awkward.
mhm.
But,
I think
yeah.
too, you'll see where people are just not they don't dress for these meetings, right? It's like, "Hey, I'll just show up in my sweatshirt and my, casual pants," and, they're just not really paying attention to their appearance, because they feel, "Hey, I am at home, I don't need to necessarily, dress up for this," and it gets a little too casual. I remember someone once using the term, uh, "With casualness comes casualties," uh,
Oh my
and
gosh.
yeah.
Yeah.
So, I think that's all part of it. I mean, you wouldn't dress that way at work necessarily, coming to an office dressed in blue jeans or sweatpants or something. So, I
Or
think
for
that's
heaven's
part
sake,
of it.
don't get up when don't get up to go get something from your bookcase behind you so they don't see that you're wearing shorts or, something that doesn't match your, business attire. Yeah, you gotta always be careful about what you're doing in front of a camera
Hmm.
'cause it'll make a difference. So what about the contagion factor? We know like germs are contagious, but what about quiet quitting? What's the impact on like peer to peer and, even from manager to employee? Like what's going on? Because we're all like part of a big ecosystem. How does it
Hmm.
affect the rest of the people on the team and just the company and the whole morale?
Well, we know the old saying, how some people can just brighten up a whole room by leaving it. Works in reverse. Someone comes into the room and they just keep they were down or they bring people up. It is a way of has a way of being catchy, so to speak. It's kind of like a virus. It's easy to pass along. You've seen it where you go into an organization and the new person gets hired in and he's all excited or she's all excited, wants to do a great job. And then after about a day or two, someone pulls them aside and say, hey, listen, that's not how we do things around here. We've got a way of doing things. We don't want anybody to outshine anybody else. So you've just got to tone it down a little bit here. We just do what we have to do here. So it becomes pretty easy to convert new hires to just doing what's acceptable and not to show too much enthusiasm or excitement because of course they want peer acceptance. They want to be accepted by their peers and they have to work with them. So yeah, how does it happen? It happens just like that. People come into an organization and they're kind of given the message, you gotta go along with the way we do things here if you're gonna get along. So that's part of it.
Yeah, we've all been there. I mean, I've been in companies where I've been pulled aside, I'm not kidding you, and told that kind of thing. I know
Yeah.
it's really weird. I mean, again, that's going back a while, but it's happened to me. You come in and you want to do things and make changes, and then there's people who are telling you otherwise. It's like interesting. So let's take a look at some of the benefits and also the dangers of quiet quitting. First of all, let's look at the employee. What's a benefit of doing this quiet quitting thing? Because eventually it all catches up with you. But what are some of the payoffs? They're really not benefits, but what's the payoff? I mean, we know some of them are obvious, but what are they?
Well, I think for the most part, when a person takes the path of quiet quitting, they can do the bare minimum. They can spend less time work or thinking about work. They are able to, in a one way, justify the fact that they're not getting paid enough or that they're in a situation that they're really not excited about, so they can just kind of put their energies elsewhere. Whether put the time in they need to put in at work and then their free time they can spend the way they want, and it somehow justifies that they invest their 5 days a week so that they can enjoy themselves after hours or on the weekend. So I think that may be part of the benefit. They may be thinking that, hey, I'm not going to do any more than I have to do, and uh, kind of justifies their uh, agreeing to continue to work at this organization. I think part of it, we have to look a little deeper. A lot of people don't necessarily like what they do for a living, and the surveys that have been done, and they vary, they range anywhere between 20% and 70% of the people that work in a position in a company, they would prefer working someplace else, at least in the polls that have been done. So what does that tell you? Well, that means they're not really tuned into their own personal mission, as Stephen Covey talked about in his excellent book, Seven Habits. They don't really know what their personal mission in life is. And as a result, they just got hired into this company, maybe to pay some bills or to just because everyone else was doing it. The fact was, it's now their way of taking in an income, and that's what they're depending on. So that's a problem. Why are they working in a position that they don't really want to be in? Well, because probably haven't been taught how to set their own mission statement and how to select a company that matches uh, their style, their aspirations, their goals in life. This is serious business here that if you ignore it, there's repercussions.
Yeah, and we'll talk about more of those when we get to the danger side of of this. What about any benefits for quiet quitting? relating to quiet quitting from the employer's standpoint? I mean, I can't really think of any. Can you?
No, but it causes problems. The benefits, well, here's the benefit. They said, "Hey, this is a red flag. We got to do something. This is going to be the catalyst so we can turn this company around. We can do something or start doing some things that are going to correct the problems that we've got here, and as a result, create the kind of company that is a better company to work at. And now ultimately, we're looking at a better company or organization that's going to service our clients or customers because they're the ones that are really paying our paychecks. We don't we don't serve those people in the right way. We're going down the wrong road and in a hurry.
That's a really good point, and I love that you shared benefits both to the employee and the employer. Now we'll flip to the other side, and I know you already shared some, but what are some of the big dangers to the employee of engaging in this type of behavior?
Well, for one thing, it certainly hurts their self-esteem. I mean, how can you be feeling good about yourself if you're just knowingly cheating your company of what you're capable of doing?
And
So
what's scary
that's
is
one
they're
thing.
creating all those new neural networks, that new neural circuitry in their brain for low grade behavior, and it's just getting hardwired into them and actually
Mhm.
digging a deeper hole.
That's right. I mean, why would you want to live a life like that? I mean, it just creates a very, very dim outlook on why you're even on the planet. Why show up for something that you really can't get engaged in? It's work should be fun. Work should be something you enjoy doing, and it taps your talents, it taps your ability to be who you were meant to be, and in a sense, it allows you to sing your song that you were given. So I think that's the real tragedy of all this is people aren't able to really tap into their true potential and really use it so that they can be the kind of person they were meant to be.
You know how you mentioned talents and abilities. You know what's really scary is the fact that since they're not trying to do more and to achieve and strive a little further, they're not getting put on assignments that will stretch their skills necessarily. They're not growing, and they are actually creating a bigger problem for them if they ever want to move forward because they're going to miss the boat because they're not going to be hireable anymore because
Mhm.
the world is changing so fast. You want to grab all the new skills and the new knowledge and be engaged in this and that, because if something goes wrong, and inevitably it will, you're not going to get jobs. You're not going to find another job.
Well, that leads us to the next point. If you've heard the term or you're gonna hear the term, this business of quiet firing. That's
Oh,
the term.
it's that.
Quiet so here's what quiet firing is. It's where the employer retaliates and say, "Okay, well, this way people wanna behave." They prevent them from getting opportunities to learn uh, new skill sets. They might make it difficult for them in terms of being able to get time off. They'll just kind of pass them over for opportunities for promotions, or maybe take away certain responsibilities for that individual. It's a form of passive aggressive behavior, quite frankly. You do this, well, I'll do that. So there's a new term. Here's a term I'll throw into. You can throw a term into anything you want. That's the quiet quandary we have out there now. The quiet firing, quiet quitting. So it's a quiet quandary.
That really is. I mean, yeah, I never, yeah. So the firing part, yeah, yeah, you're gonna, and also they can withhold raises, and
Yeah.
I don't know, with groceries in some areas, and I've seen it. Literally, prices have tripled and quadrupled, and
Hmm.
a couple things I've purchased in the last 2 months, literally quadrupled. Um, I don't really know how they're going to keep up with things because nobody owes you a raise unless you're in a certain industry where it's regulated, but their raises are at choice. So wow, that's something to definitely be concerned about. The quiet quandary. Interesting. Wow, that's a good one. What else? What are some other dangers to employee or employer around this quiet quitting? Because obviously, this is the new nightmare for HR and pretty much everybody.
Hmm. Well, it's creating a toxic environment. So that's going to have repercussions to itself where people don't want to come into work. It's just kind of a feeling that people just feel like they don't like themselves for coming into a place they don't want to be there, but they've got to pay the bills. The people that are trying to manage these people, they're not feeling real good about themselves. It's difficult to work with someone that doesn't want to be there or does the least amount of work. It makes you feel like you're not a good manager, that you're not a good business owner. So it's frustrating. So these are things that have repercussions. They go back and forth. Doesn't have to be this way. You know, there are ways we can get out of this mess, and it starts with recognizing that there is a problem first, and then going about. And we can talk about those if you'd like when you want to talk about them.
Yeah, let's turn
Solutions.
to that right now because I know we only have a few minutes left.
Okay.
So what are some tactics people can use? I guess it's really more on the employer side to get people moved off of stuck.
hmm Well, sit down and have a heart-to-heart meeting with everyone. Say, hey, here's where we're at. Here's what we see as a concern or a problem. What are some of the causes? And get everybody involved in brainstorming the causes. Have a good, honest, open discussion. Next, let's start brainstorming some of the possible solutions. And let's pick the best solution or solution or group of solutions and start to work on them. Now, if a company doesn't feel comfortable doing that, bring in an outsider. That's how a lot of change typically takes place. You bring in an outsider like a coach or a consultant, somebody that knows what they're doing that can lead that type of a discussion and then have an action plan. What are we going to do from this point forward? Not just talk about it and forget about it, but let's put it on the calendar. What do we need to do? Let's have more discussions. Let's take a look at the appraisal system that we're using. Let's take a look at this. What can we do to make this a better company? Do we need to do more hybrid work? Do we need to give people more tools, allow them to have more opportunity to develop their skill sets? Let's get to these hard conversations about, hey, maybe we need some help with childcare. Maybe we need some help around here with certain types of things we've been ignoring in the past. Let's take a look at our people. Is there some form of favoritism that exists in this company where certain people are being overlooked for some of the skill sets they could be developing, but they've been passed on because they're just not engaged in the company. Get at the heart of the matter. Look at what we can do to make this a really, really special company. And it can be done. It is being done.
And
That's part of it.
another thing is that I'm really a fan of the hybrid model. I think people should be given options when necessary because putting people in a situation where they're fearful for their health or their mental welfare to force them back into doing something after they've been having to stay home for a couple years, that's harsh. I mean, that's really, really harsh on somebody. I mean, in my
Mhm,
opinion only, I'm not the employer, but it's hard to flip people around into a new reality when they might not be ready for that. And we're
mhm,
all different. But I really love that there are some employers that are really trying to look out for the health and welfare, physical health, mental health of their employees because it's so important nowadays.
mhm. Well, that's the key, I think, is we look at what can be changed in the workplace. It's a paradigm shift. We have to change our paradigms and how this all works together. But think about the practical side of it as well. Hey, if I can spend 2 hours less a day commuting back and forth to work, that's a lot of extra time. That's what, 10 hours a week? You multiply that 40 hours a month, that's a lot of time. By the year, you can add that. Plus the fact it costs money. Gas has gone up, so it's more expensive. Have we received a raise to cover our gas expenses? These are things that it's certainly a lot more convenient working from home. And we've found people are, for the most part, they're much more efficient working from home. They end up even putting in an extra time because it's more convenient to put that into the workplace. So that's something I think is it's changing. It's going to continue to change, and the employers that are fighting that they're gonna be behind. They're gonna be behind in the long run.
Well, as we come to the conclusion of our interview, it's been really interesting learning about all of this. What's one piece of advice that you would give if around this topic for employee or employer?
I would just say to stop and think, what can we do to make this a better situation? What kind of conversations do we need to start having? And what type of action do we need to be taking to make this the kind of company it really can be and use this as an opportunity to make that happen?
All right. I want to thank you so much, Tom, Tom Borg of Tom Borg Consulting, for being a guest on today's edition of Michigan Entrepreneur. If you'd like more information about our program, please visit us at www.michiganentrepreneurtv.com. Please join me again in the future when I interview another enterprising entrepreneur. Until then, wishing you the best of business.